Hey guys, so welcome to my video where I demonstrate and explain how to fill out the disclosure of information on lead-based paint and or lead-based paint hazards. So nationwide, the rule is that if a house was built before 1978, then lead paint was used most likely in some aspect of that home. So just as a point of differentiation, if the home was built in 1978, it doesn't apply. Okay, so it's 1977 and before this applies to. All right, so if you represent the buyer, the one thing to remember is that the listing agent should already have this uploaded into the MLS. If they don't, they need to get this to you, but make no mistake about it, this is initiated by the seller, and here's why. The seller has to disclose to any potential buyer what the status is with regards to lead-based paint. So as the title says, disclosure of information on lead-based paint. Who's disclosing? The seller. Okay, so it says the seller's options are presence of lead-based paint and or lead-based paint hazards, and they will check one of the several options below. Either known lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards are present in the housing. So this is complete acknowledgement that the seller is aware that yes, there is lead-based paint. The second option is seller has no knowledge of lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards in the housing. So that doesn't necessarily mean that some don't exist. It just means that the seller is not aware of it. Now, from a common sense perspective, chances are by today's date, the house will have been repainted at some point between its original build and today, but not always. But when a home changes hands several times, the danger or the concern with regards to the home having lead-based paint becomes less and less important to future sellers or future buyers. It doesn't mean that your buyer shouldn't be concerned, okay? But I'm just telling you, common sense, that's kind of what happens. All right, so then the seller is going to check option B, so it says records and reports available to the seller. You're going to check one or the other. Seller has provided the purchaser with all available records and reports pertaining to lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards in the housing. Okay, so this would be an option that they would check if they have such reports. Option B2 is seller has no records or reports pertaining to lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards in the housing. So a report is going to derive from an inspection that may have been done years and years ago with regards to lead-based paint. Maybe there was an inspection done, maybe there was some remediation done. If those reports exist, they would check this first box up here, right? But many times they're not going to have anything, and so they're going to check this. So let's say that the seller has chosen, I have no knowledge of any lead-based paint, and I certainly don't have any reports. Okay, this is probably what you're going to run into most of the time. Well, then this is what's going to be presented to the buyer. The buyer then has options. The buyer can say either initial, it says initial, right? So the buyer can initial here that either discloses that the purchaser has received copies of all information listed above. Well, in our example, there is no information to provide. Or the purchaser has received the pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. Now, this is a standard federally issued pamphlet that is available in transaction desk. Okay. So this is the buyer's responsibility to deliver it. Okay. Then it then goes on to say the purchaser has, and you can check one of these two boxes, received a 10-day opportunity or mutually agreed upon period to conduct a risk assessment or inspection for the presence of lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards. So that just means that the buyer is electing to have a separate inspection done to verify that there is or is not any lead-based paint hazard in the home. Or the second option, waive the opportunity to conduct a risk assessment or inspection for the presence of lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards. All right. And then this last initial, I'm not sure where they place it here, but this is for the seller to acknowledge. All right. So, or the agent rather. So the agent will initial here to disclose that they have informed the seller of the seller's obligation under 42 USC 485-52 and D, and is aware of his responsibility to ensure compliance. Okay, which means that if you own a home that was built before 78, you have obligations. Okay, and this is where the agent acknowledges, hey, I've told the seller what they need to do. Okay, and so based on all that, they should come to you from the seller. Okay, so the buyer does have some work to do on this, but their only consent is by initialing. Okay, and then they come down here, seller signs. In my example, John and Jane Seller, and then the buyer signs. And in my example, it's going to be Troy Aikman, Mrs. Troy Aikman, and then each agent. Okay, but the thing to remember here is that this is initiated by the seller, and because the buyer has to react or opt what they're going to do based on what the seller discloses. All right, hope you found that helpful. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.